and we start to make God's desires our desires, how that changes us. And one of those ways is through relationships. I haven't always had the best relationships, but probably the most influential people in my life were my parents. I mean, it's the first relationship you really see as a child, right? You see the way your parents interact one with another. Now, I grew up in a home where my dad worked outside the home. In fact, he worked several jobs. I grew up in New Jersey in a traditional, what I thought was a traditional home. My mom stayed home with the kids. She took care of the kids, the house, the finances. She took care of everything. My father went to work, came home. He'd come home, put his feet up. Hello, what's for dinner? Hey, while you're at it, would you get me a cup of coffee? As we got older, when I hit 13, my parents moved us from New Jersey to Montana. And in that shift, there was a change in their relationship because my dad only worked one job when we moved there, and that was the goal. He wanted out of the rat race of New Jersey, and he wanted to be able to be home. I mean, we didn't see my dad on very many occasions as far as for dinner because we were in bed by the time he got home. So we saw him on holidays when he had the day off. But in Montana, it made it possible for him to work one job. But then they felt a call from God. They felt that they needed to put 6 kids from kindergarten up to a freshman through Christian school. Now, my dad didn't make enough money to cover that, so how were they going to manage that? And they decided to open a daycare in our home. That comes with a lot of different challenges. But one thing that I noticed was that my mom's responsibilities did not change. Even though my dad's responsibilities lessened, my mother's increased because now she was working full-time from 6:30 in the morning till 7 at night, and she still had the role of finances and raising children and making sure we had the right clothes when we went out the door in the morning and cereal was out there or eggs were made or whatever it might be. My mom was still in charge of those things. So for me, I was confused about how this was a partnership. How was this relationship even? How was this relationship viable? How did that work? And how could my mom not be resentful? And we'll get to the answer to that a little bit later. So from the beginning, God knew that man needed more than just him in a relationship. God saw a need to be fulfilled, and he provided Eve for Adam. And I think back to that time, and I think, what a perfect world that would have been. In my mind, paradise is sitting on a beach with the ocean roaring. And I can close my eyes and picture that. And I can picture myself walking with Jesus and talking about all the things I have questions about. And in one moment, in one defiant moment, that was all taken away. That was all gone. We find that in Genesis 3:7 that sin has intruded their perfect life. That one act changed the dynamic of relationships for all time. So I'm going to read to you the verses that, to me, everything that we've talked about so far in being transformed, to me, it comes down to these 2 verses. And I think that when Rob does his message and when Pastor finishes off, I think you're going to see that these 2 verses can combine all of these things we're talking about, and we can understand that being transformed is really about having God at the center. Therefore, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And isn't that our goal? No matter what type of transformation, we're looking to be transformed in such a way that it pleases God, because it's all about worshiping God, right? So We see that, and we go back to Genesis here, and we see that sin intruded on this perfect life. And we already see that the relationship shifts because Adam blames Eve. Eve blames the serpent. And the biggest consequence of all is that the relationship with God, their relationship, and our relationship today is fractured. And there's only one way for that to be healed. When I think about relationships in the Bible, there are two in the Old Testament and one in the New Testament that really come to mind when I think about these. The first is of Joseph and his brothers. Their father favors Joseph. And if you go to Genesis 37, you can read the story of how his brothers were so jealous of that favoritism, of that relationship that the father and son had. They were so jealous that they plot to kill him. And there are a lot of other events that happened, but it comes down to he was sold into slavery by his brothers. And yet God had him. And the key to that is Joseph knew that God had him. His life is not a picnic. And before long, he has risen up the ranks because of his trust in God. He's risen up the ranks of Pharaoh's kingdom, and all of a sudden he's in charge. He's in charge. And who shows up during the famine? His brothers. Now, I don't know about you, but I think I would be pretty easy to get some righteous revenge at that point, right? I think it would be pretty easy to say, oh, you want something from me now? Really? Not happening. And I think that's our instinctual reaction, because you hurt me. And if you look at Joseph's life, it didn't just hurt a little. It hurt a lot. Yet with all the wrongs that were thrown his way, how was Joseph able to forgive that? How was he able to put that aside and have a good relationship with his brothers and his family going forward? What made it easy for him to do that? If you go back in the beginning of his story, you'll see that even as a young man, before he was sold into slavery, he was already having dreams about what God was going to do in his life. And I believe that if I were the person sitting in that prison, I would be clinging to the dreams that God gave me. I would be clinging to the knowledge that God had my hand the whole way through. No matter what, he was going to be by my side, no matter what they threw at me. And so he trusted because he knew that God had a plan for his life. Joseph's relationship with God was so strong that it carried him through every other relationship that he encountered along the way. You think about, if you really want to see, go out and read, because there's so much information in there, how many things Joseph really went through with different people and how he managed to overcome that with God's help. The other relationship I think about is David and Jonathan. 1 Samuel 18:1. I'm going to turn to that real quick here. I didn't mark this one. I don't know why I didn't mark this one. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. Does that remind you of any verses that we read in the New Testament? Does that remind you of any commands that we're giving? Love your neighbor like yourself. Jonathan did that. And as you read through 1 Samuel on the adventures of David, and I challenge you to do that because there's some great stories, you will find that this is a friendship that is so binding that it transcends family. See, Saul is king, and Saul is Jonathan's father. Saul is out to kill David. Yet who does Jonathan side with? Oh yeah, David. He is not worried about what his father thinks of him. He is worried about doing what he knows is pleasing to God. And he knows that he believes the same as David. They are on the same playing field when it comes to who comes first in their life. Pleasing God is first. Now you have to remember, this is the Old Testament, so they're more about the laws than they are about what we call a relationship with Jesus. So they're more worried about, are my actions pleasing to God? On 2 occasions, even knowing all this, even knowing that Saul was out to kill him, David twice had the opportunity to kill Saul. And he didn't do it. Why? Why didn't he take the opportunity to get rid of the threat? Because God didn't ask him to. God did not ask him to. God did not make that a door for him to walk through. In the end, during the war at Mount Gilboa, Saul commits suicide because he's about to lose the war. And he knows it. So he kills himself. And Jonathan is also killed. In fact, all of Saul's sons are killed. And yet, if you turn to 2 Samuel 1:11, you will find that David mourned the loss of not just Jonathan, but of Saul. Second Samuel 1:11. Oh, that's not the right one. Oh, I'm in the wrong place. That's okay. Then David and all the men with him took hold of their clothes and tore them. They mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul and his son Jonathan. And even though the man who persecuted him, he's named first. He's not named, I would have thought Jonathan would have named first because he was beloved friend, right? And God tells us to love our enemies, just as we do our friends. And what David is saying is he honored the relationship he had with Saul because God made Saul king. It wasn't by man, it was by God. So in essence, David was honoring God. Human relationships are not bound by blood and marriage. They can be, but they are not always. And every interaction we have with people is a relationship. I mean, think about it. I generally get the same lady at the grocery store, and she asks how I am and how my grandkids are, because she knows who they are. So that's a sort of relationship. We as a church entity, we have a relationship with the people in this community. The people that we walk side by side with in ministry work. The people that we're trying to influence into being in ministry with us. Side by side with people that we are trying to win to Christ. We have a relationship with these people. I'm pretty sure Pastor Jamie can tell you that he ministers to people while he's working out at the gym in the morning. Everywhere we go, we are an example. We are in a relationship with the people that we are involved with. Regardless of their status as saved or unsaved, they are relationships. Jonathan and David both believed in God and both desired to live lives that were pleasing to God, and both were willing to do it at all costs. At the center of all healthy relationships is an active relationship with God. In the New Testament, there is Saul, who eventually becomes Paul. Paul did not start out as a great Christian. He did not start out as a champion of God. In fact, he was a persecutor of Christians. His relationship with the apostles is one based on his desire to wipe them from the face of the earth. See, Saul is a Pharisee, and Pharisees believe in the law. They didn't believe in this Jesus. They believed that he was full of nothing but heresy. So he believed that while he was wiping out Christians, that he was serving God, that he was doing the right thing. He had a great relationship within the Pharisees' world, but his relationship with the community and his relationship with the Christian community in general was very poor. People feared him because they knew that he wanted to get rid of them. But God, two of my favorite words. God enters the picture and says, you know what? I'm going to use Saul. I can use that man. I can use that tenacity. I can use that boldness. And I can use it to grow the kingdom. I can use that man. Now, if you had asked Saul what he thought about that statement, he would have probably laughed at you and locked you up. But Saul is on his way to Damascus, and a great light comes down, and he falls to his knees, and God says, Lord, why are you Saul, why are you persecuting me? And Saul's like, who are you? But he knew. He knew. And God asks the question again, Saul, why are you persecuting me? I am Jesus, he says to Saul. I am Jesus, the Lord. So Saul is blinded for 3 days. And during those 3 days, I speculate that it wasn't a time of arguing with God. I would almost bet that it was a time of prayerful conversation with God. God imparting to Saul the knowledge that he was going to need as Paul. The knowledge that he was going to need to build relationships with the apostles. Because he was going to need those apostles to get the job done. And when he tried to join the apostles, what do you think their response was? Did they welcome him with open arms? No, it was fear. They're like, you want us to trust that God has so changed you that you're not trying to infiltrate us, kill us off, and go back to the rest of the Pharisees? Yeah, we're not buying that. It took Barnabas standing up and saying, wait, I saw him preaching in Damascus. They were after him. They were trying to kill him because he was preaching the word. I attest, I witness that he has changed. And it is then that we see the shift in the relationship. It is then we see the acceptance of Saul as Paul. It's then that we see them get together and unite and become brothers of spreading the word. So what does that mean to us? I mean, really, what does 3 stories from the Bible mean in today's world? Well, we know. We know that our relationships need to be healthy. We know that we are instinctively selfish people, and we look to cover our own needs first than the needs of others. So what can we do? What can we, as the body of believers, do to make sure that our relationships are healthy, that our relationships are where God wants us to be, that our desires are what God wants for our lives? What can we do? And I think most of us know the answer. Study His Word. And I don't mean spend 5 minutes doing a devotional in the morning. Because you know that no relationship will be strengthened if it's only given 5 minutes of attention. Luke 6:47. I will show you what he is like who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice. In order for you to have a healthy relationship with somebody else, your relationship with God has to be healthy. And He will show you how to have a healthy life, how to live your life according to His desires, if you study His Word. Buy a good Bible. Personally, I prefer the ones that have a study Bible, because they have cross-references and explanations that help you as you study. It's not about you trying to figure it all out and drive yourself crazy. You have some place to start. For that matter, you can get a good study guide. Pastor can certainly get you set up with your own personal study guide. I'm sure he has plenty of recommendations. I can help you as well. Rob can help you. If you get lost, get with the pastor. He'll help you get on the right track. But study. Don't just read. Study. Study gives the implications that you're bringing that word in and you're releasing it out. You don't take the word in and keep it to yourself. You don't take what you learned and keep it inside. You act it out. You put it into action. You do. You show. You worship. Pray. Colossians 4, verses 2 through 3. Devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful and thankful. And pray for us too, that God may open a door for our message, that we may proclaim the mystery of Christ, for which I am in chains. Which means he was in jail. And he's still saying, pray that I can get the message out. He is still anticipating that God's not done with him yet. He's still anticipating that God is saying, you have more to do. So he's praying, and he's asking for prayer, that he will keep that focus, that he will know that his relationships will continue. But he first must keep his relationship with Christ. Did you know that in the Bible it records that Jesus prayed? And did you know that it records 25 times he prayed? How many times did he not record? I mean, because they didn't record every moment of Jesus' life. I wish they had. But how many times did we not see where he secretly went off and prayed to his Father? If he feels the need to pray, and if he feels the need to pray to God for direction, for peace, for that connection, shouldn't we? Shouldn't we? Gather together. I bring this one up because this is where a lot of relationship building comes in. And there's a lot of noise out there in the world today that you don't need to go to church on Sundays. You can just watch it from TV. You don't need to get together and have fellowship. It's just a time for people to gossip and have a meal. It's just another reason to eat. I disagree. I disagree 100%. In Matthew 18:20, for where 2 or 3 come together in my name, there I am with them. And over in Hebrews, chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Let us not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. And day is capitalized. The gathering together isn't about the food. The gathering together is not just to have a place to go. Gathering together is to build relationships one with another so that we can do our mission. So that the mission that we are charged with from God can be met. We are here to lift each other up. We gather to celebrate with each other, cry with each other, worship and sing with each other. And we're here to strengthen each other. Because it's a cruel world out there. And those relationships are tough. And it's the relationships that we have here that help us. Our relationship with God gets us going. But here on earth, God already knows. Look at Adam and Eve. He knew that they needed human relationships that were solid too. We do too. That has not changed. We need the relationship within these walls in order for us to face what's going on out there. So that we know that we're not the only one in the boat. We're all together. We're a family, and we will help each other in times of need. But we'll also be there for the good times. We'll celebrate together. We'll worship together. Live out what you are learning. I can't emphasize that enough. Don't be superficial. Just because you show up for church on Sunday does not mean that you get to check it off some imaginary list and say, yep, done my Christian duty for the week. Because that is not what it's about. You must be vested with your heart, your soul, your mind, and apply everything that you are learning because you desire your life to be what God desires for your life. What your relationship is with God will determine what your relationship is with other people. Think about it. You know what forgiveness looks like because God forgave you. And when you know what that looks like, it's easier to forgive somebody else. It's easier to look and go, wow, I was really short with that person, and I need to apologize because it really had nothing to do with them. It wasn't their fault. The old you probably would have just walked away and said, oh well. But once Jesus enters in, once you have that relationship with him, things change. You view things differently. I think of a time I was in Walmart and I was shopping. And I waited for a lady to move out of the hamburger aisle, and I moved into the hamburger aisle, and some other lady came in and said, excuse me, I'll just be a minute. I was like, I'll be done in just a second. She's like, no, I was being nice. Now I'm done. You get it the blip out of my way. And she was not friendly. Now the old me would have said, come on, girl, let's go outside. I'll take you on. That was the old me. I confronted everything, face on, and I didn't do it in a nice way. It was all about winning. It wasn't about the relationship that I could possibly build with that person I was interacting with. It was not about that. It was about my own selfish desire to have my heart be there first, right? And make her wait. Now in this particular case, she was being very rude about it, and her husband was shrinking down behind the cart, and her kids had their coats over their heads. When all was said and done, I got my selection, I moved down. She was still yelling at me as I'm going out the door. You get your white trash, blah, 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 out this place. Don't ever shove them in front of my face. And as I'm going to my car, I'm thinking to myself, how could I have handled that better? Is there something I could have done? That's how you know that you are changing. That's how you know that you're allowing God to transform your life, that you're allowing his will to be your will. Because all of a sudden you find yourself questioning, could I have done that better, even though you didn't do anything wrong? How could I have been a better witness for Jesus? If you ask the question, he will show up. Once you acknowledge and accept Jesus' love for you, you will love others. Your relationships will change. I think that Paul's transformation is the greatest example of how God can transform your life. All of his relationships changed after he said yes to God. Think about it. What do you think his relationship with the Pharisees were after that? His relationship probably wasn't very good for them. And they were probably after him. In fact, they were. They tried to kill him when he was in Damascus. The apostles didn't doubt him anymore because he proved out that he was allowing God to live. He was allowing God in and the Spirit out. In and out, in and out. Inhale, exhale. Inhale the Spirit, exhale the fruits of the Spirit. Right? If you inhale the Spirit of God, if you allow that to so fill you, what are you going to put out there? What are you going to put out there for other people? How is that going to fit into your relationships? I think the biggest change that you see in Paul is that he went from being a slayer of Christians to a champion of Jesus Christ. And he stood up for him at all costs. At all costs. It didn't matter what the cost was. And every person that Paul encountered knew where Paul stood with God, knew what his relationship with Jesus Christ was. Because he spoke it. He lived it. And that's what we should be doing in our relationships. And as we change, there will be people who say, I have plenty of people who are like, yeah, I'm not into the God thing. God, we really can't be friends anymore. Okay. And you have to graciously accept that. That's their choice. That's their right. And lovingly say, I understand. I love you anyway. And if you ever need me, I'm here for you. Because that's what Jesus would do. The relationships that you are in that are strong, believer or non, they can become stronger. Particularly the Christian ones. My relationship with my mom is way better than it ever was. Not because I was a Christian at a young age, walked away from God, said, yeah, that is not for me. But through that whole thing, my relationship with my mom was up and down and up and down and all over the place. But once I gave my life to God and allowed Him to change me, my relationship with my mom is way up here. It is awesome. And yours will change too. So in the beginning, I talked about my parents' relationship. And I shared this with Pastor Jamie already. I didn't know that my dad was not saved. My mom was. But my dad's parents believed that you're saved through the salvation of your parents, and that travels down through the family. And so as long as you continue to do goodwill, do good works in the community, you are saved. That is not true. Well, we didn't know that as kids. What we saw was the outside. We didn't see what was going on in their relationship behind closed doors. We didn't see what was going on in their relationship as things started to shift. We could feel it. We could feel the change, but we didn't know what it was. My mother, out of obedience to God, moved from New Jersey to Montana. She did not want to go. My mom, out of obedience to God, served my father for almost 40 years when he got saved at the age of 55. They started dating when she was 15. So my mom prayed for my dad for 40 years. 40 years it took for that type of a relationship to happen for my dad. Did it change my dad? At the age of 55. Can you change? Yes. Some of the things stayed the same. But my dad was not a demonstrative, affectionate person. I can only remember one kiss on my cheek when I graduated high school, and that's all I can remember. But from that day forward, from the day that my dad got saved and the following week walked down for baptism, from that day forward, he never left the house without kissing my mom and telling her I love you. Never. God is in the business of change. So the most important question you need to ask yourself is, what is my relationship with God like? Am I allowing to change me? Not worried about changing other people. Oh, I want my husband to change. I want my daughter to change. I need my grandkids to change. I need my pastor to change. You want something to change. God's not in the business of changing other people for you. God is in the business of changing you so that you can live the life that He has planned for you. You are not going to love others like Jesus does unless you already love Jesus. And you're not going to know what that looks like unless you have a relationship with Him. It's not about showing up for church. It's not about singing some songs. It's about what are you doing every single day to allow Him to change you. Let's go to prayer. Father God,